Hello and welcome to What a Guy Wants. I am Coach Yogesh, and this is my friend and co host, Coach Ali. And together, we are here to discuss all things men. This podcast is for anything and everything we want to talk about. What do men think about? What do men like to talk about? And one thing which I feel I, as a man, really want to talk about is imposter syndrome. So, Ali, can you explain to our viewers who haven't heard this word before what is imposter syndrome?
So, imposter syndrome, the best way I can explain it is through my own example is that whilst working in banking, I still remember just being there, right? And this need to know all the answers. This fear that one fine day, what's going to happen is that I'm going to get found out. They will be able
Yeah,
to see through my mask
yeah,
and they'll be able to see that I'm not good enough. And when they'll be able to see that I'm not good enough, I'll be exposed. And then when I'll be exposed, I'm going to get kicked out. And then life is going to be over. So it's this constant fear, and it's for some people it's about 70% of the people, right, at some point, as per Forbes, have felt imposter syndrome. With some it sticks there. For me, it was just there all the time, this fear that I'm going to be found out today is going to be the day I get found out.
yeah, yeah.
And it's very real. It's extremely real.
I love that. You know what comes to mind is this very popular show, a TV show for all those who love watching Suits. We have a certain Mike Ross who works for Harvey Specter. Harvey Specter is like this badass New York lawyer, the best in the world. He actually tells everyone, calls him that, and he himself self proclaims, I'm the best closer in town. And Mike Ross is actually an imposter. So they're actually showing imposter syndrome. He's actually a genius. He's actually generally better than Harvey Specter, all of the people there, because he has an identity. So he knows the law, he loves the law. He's actually a really good lawyer, very kind, compassionate. He does a lot of pro bonos, helps people because he's not actually done the Harvard degree. He doesn't have a law degree. He's passed the bar for other people, but he doesn't have that. At every step, every time during a case, he feels he's a fraud. There's actually a song also, You're a Fraud and You Know It. And I think that specifically shows us imposter syndrome because you are a very good professional. You are very good at what you do. You have all the skills, but some belief. In his case, he was actually doing that. He was actually practicing law without being a lawyer. But all of us have this thing that belief that I'm actually don't belong to the table. I actually don't have what it takes, even though we might be better than a lot of people on the table. But the belief, that niggling belief, is basically what imposter syndrome is.
Yeah, it's that belief that I'm not good enough and I'm going to get fined out and they'll be able to see through me.
Yeah.
And so I have to keep pretending. In fact, I was just looking up imposter syndrome and I've got this thing from Tom Hanks. And he says that no matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are they going to discover that I am, in fact, a fraud and take everything away from me?
Yeah.
So it's
So
about,
strong. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and it's constant, right? It's about one day they'll find out, and all this everything that I've created, this reality that exists for me, right? It's all going to be taken away from me. It's all going to
Yeah.
go away because I'm going to get found out. And
Yeah.
for many people, it's going to be like, and then my life's going to be over.
Yeah.
And there's a
So
lot of shame embedded in that.
yeah. So you've spoken of as much as 70% of the population of people actually have imposter syndrome, but not a lot of people would know the term or would be knowing how to detect it. So what would be a couple of things that comes up that okay, this is how you detect that you actually have imposter syndrome?
So I would say that go into the feeling, right? Do you feel this need to be perfect? Do you feel this need to have it all sorted, have perfect? Do you feel as though, I think that the easiest way to find out is that, do you feel that you're a fraud? Do you feel that you were here by wherever you are? You're here by chance and one day you're going to get found out? Do you feel that you're
Yeah.
actually wearing a mask? So, and it's just these simple things, right? Which will
Yeah.
help us detect whether we've got the imposter syndrome. And it's something that
That's,
there's some people who have it for a longer period of time. For some people it
yeah.
comes for a temporary phase and goes away.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
all different, and we all perceive it and react to it differently.
Yeah, I hear you. Especially for a lot of artists, right? If I have that, basically the first thing that came up for me is like it's unworthiness. Like I don't deserve to be here. I'm not good enough to be here. So for a lot of artists, they have to be free and easy. And if they have this unworthiness happening, then they can't express their art. Like a Tom Hanks can't act naturally. Even for a sports person, if he's having that imposter syndrome, he can't play fully, openly. He's then a little bit in a shell. So would you say those are also aspects that happens when you have imposter syndrome?
So it could be yes and no. For some people, it pushes them to actually even perform better because they want
Yeah.
to keep that facade, right? So
Yeah.
you've also got people like Serena Williams, right? You've got Tom Hanks. You've got these individuals who've done really well for themselves. So it's pushed them to even do more. And whereas others, they crumble.
Right.
And because we're humans, right? It's just not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Everyone reacts in a different way.
Absolutely. So, would you say then the person who had the facade and he really pushed himself, overachieved, would the imposter syndrome go away because he's achieved now?
It doesn't. It doesn't. So the best way I can explain it is from my own self. It's this thing where okay, you know what? Maybe I feel this now, but when I get that promotion, right, I'm gonna feel worthy. And when I feel worthy, then this feeling will go away because then I'm worthy, then I'll be good.
Yeah.
And then that promotion happens. But that worthiness doesn't come. That feeling of like being enough doesn't come. And
Yeah.
you feel as though, oh, you know what? Now I have to pretend even more and have to do even more because the
Yeah.
thing is that now I've gotten promoted. So this promotion can be taken away from me. Then you work for the
Yes.
next promotion and then you start working up and up and up and up, and it still doesn't go. And
Uh,
for some people, they can deal with it. They find help. There's some people, it's only a temporary thing. But
yeah.
what's rooted within imposter syndrome is this need to be perfect. And what
Mm.
happens is that this need to look perfect and be perfect and have the answers for everything. And when there's no perfection, right? And when somebody asks us a question where we don't know the answer to, for example,
Yeah.
it's more like it's almost like a shame coming over, right? That how can I not
Yeah.
have known this? How could I not know the answer?
Yeah.
And the truth is that we will never know the answer to everything, but we can always respond by saying, okay, you know what? I didn't know that. Let me look it up and come back to you on that.
Yeah.
It's as easy as that, but it's about
Yeah.
giving ourselves the credit of being able to do that. And it's the imperfection, right? It's about embracing our imperfection for whatever it
Beautiful.
is and working on it and building upon it every single day.
Wow. Yeah. I understand now. I see it. Basically, just performing will not actually dissolve the imposter syndrome because the higher I rise, the greater the fall can be. So there's even more fear now. Oh my God, now the fall will be 10 feet. Oh, I've gone 15 now, the fall will be 15 feet. So there's
Absolutely.
even more at stake at that moment. So just performing does not dissolve it. And a lot of it is due to perfectionism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot
Interesting.
of it is to like perfectionism. In fact, there's this, this feeling like I wrote a few notes down. This need to be the expert. This need to be the perfectionist. This person, this need to be the superhuman. This need to be
Yeah.
this natural genius. And there's one more, it's about I can do it on my own and I do not need help. This need to do things without asking for help because when it's like taking help felt as a sign of weakness.
Yeah. So, Ali, as coaches, right? I think we all have experienced imposter syndrome. And there is a prevalent, very strong need to be the expert in your field, right? So, when I go on social media, I'm expected to be the expert in a certain field, in relationships, for example. And would you say wanting to be an expert there makes you become more invested or more going towards imposter syndrome?
So this is really interesting. So I'm going to take a step back. It's almost like when you said I'm expected to. My question for you is that who is expecting you to?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I would always say is that I'm just thinking about it from my perspective, is wanting to become the expert at something, but being unattached to it, knowing that there will always be place for learning. So attaching ourselves to actually growing rather than being the absolute expert.
Right.
Because what something will work right now through more research and development, maybe it might not work in 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Not
Maybe it becomes
work.
obsolete.
And maybe it becomes obsolete, right? So it's about just, of course, to wanting to become that expert. But so wanting to be that to-go person, yet knowing that it's okay not to know, it's okay to learn more, it's okay
Yep.
to keep growing, and it's okay that one will not have all the answers because one is human.
Yeah, that's when you asked whose expectations, it's actually there is no one person. There's actually someone on social media, the whole world's expectations. And I think the imposter syndrome would feel the weight of expectations of the whole world outside to prove himself. Wouldn't that have one of the functions of an imposter syndrome?
So when you said that, right, what came up for me is like this quote from Jay Shetty. He says that I am not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am.
Exactly.
So it's not even the world out there. It's like us being in the minds of the world and seeing
Yes.
ourselves from that lens, and then
Yes.
and judging ourselves from that perspective. So
Yeah.
in the end of the day, I feel that it's just us and not so much the world. It's about, sometimes we try to get into other people's head and view ourselves from that perspective.
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
in when something great happens or when something not
Yeah.
so great happens.
Yeah.
And again, it's just about that. And then according to that, we build that kind of pressure in our lives.
Yes. So basically, the focus goes there. What is that person thinking of me? What is social media thinking of me? What are my reviews when I'm not trusting myself? Would you say that? Would that be accurate? That I don't trust in my own self, in my skills. So I'm caring about the outside perception of me.
So more than trust, I would say it's about I don't trust that I'm enough. So I have to keep doing more and more and more to prove that I'm enough. But
Yeah.
the proving of that enough is just to myself because it's to the person, because in the end of the day, that person is feeling that I'm less than and one day I'll get found out. So what can I do? What is all that I can do not to get found out?
Found out.
So
Yeah.
it's almost like, we're under attack. We're constantly, what can we do to not get harmed? What
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
almost becomes like a protective mechanism. So it
Yeah.
keeps making us doing. And of course, there's brilliance that can come out of that doing. But imagine if that brilliance can come from a place of compassion and
Yeah.
that comes from a place of being knowing that it's okay that I'm not perfect because nothing is right. Everything improves. Only the other day we were having that conversation of that Nokia 3310. When it came out,
Yeah.
I was like, it was one of the most perfect phones in the world. It like I
Yeah.
felt that
The blue
we
one.
were at the the blue one. We were at the epitome of technology, and now
Yeah.
it's now see where we are. So again, it's more like there is nothing known as perfection, right? Because for
Yeah.
perfection doesn't have any finish line and
Yeah.
nothing can ever be perfect. Even the phones we hold in our hands right now
Yeah.
aren't perfect. They're great, they're amazing, but they aren't perfect.
Yeah, Apple is going to get a new one very soon, next September.
Yeah.
No, what's the biggest takeaway for me is the imposter syndrome makes us do a lot, but I've always believed there are different types of doing. There's one type of doing which is coming out of lack. I'm not good enough, so I have to do. And that is a very exhausting doing that is trying to fill a hole doing. And generally, trying to fill that hole is a whole bottomless pit where we keep doing, and it's never enough. And the stakes keep rising. So that's the kind of doing which is exhausting, hurts our health. Yes, it is rewarded in the corporate world. It is rewarded short term because that's where crazy performance people come in who basically disregard family, relationships, everything, and just willing to power through. But from a long term, it really takes a huge toll on the psyche, on the body, on the mind, everything. And then there's the other type of doing, which is comes from because this person is doing so much, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to do, not going to take action, but it's going to take inspired action. So when I take an action out of fullness, out of wholeness, out of fun, out of play, out of being good, those actions generally give you more bang for your buck. So that means there's less energy, more results, and that actions are very nourishing as well. So depleting actions, nourishing actions. So the doing has to come from a space of being. When that balance is good, we are in a very good space. Then everything moves very well. Versus
Mm.
this one, I've seen it all around consistently. comes from a very survival era. I don't have food on my plate. If I don't do, my kids are going to starve. And that energy, and I don't think that's prevalent today for a lot of us. There might be true for a few, and that's a situation. I think that situation, that's where the situation context is at. But if that context doesn't apply to you and you're moving from that doing energy, then that's where we're actually hurting than being productive. More hurt than good.
So, as I'm thinking about it, I would almost say it's that feeling of being caught. It's almost like a feeling
Yeah.
of like, I'm going to get caught, I'm going to get found out. And the day
Yeah.
I get found out, then life is going to end and then my kids
Yeah.
will start. So there's a big story in the middle which causes us to think like that. And again, I would say that to be okay with oneself is to accept that it's okay to be imperfect, accept that imperfection is the way we are. That's how we've been created. Yeah, and the only job, right, for us is to become slightly less imperfect with the passing of each day, and to embrace that and to feel enough. It's more about, it comes from a place of not feeling enough.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I remember that when I started 12 years into the banking industry, I remember that one day I spoke to my boss and I'm like, this is something that I'm going through. I feel that, like, no matter what I do, one day I'll get found out. And he's like, you know what, let's call the team and let's talk about it. And like, such an amazing dude. And he brought the team and we were like about 7, 8 of us just sitting there. And I'm like, okay, you know what, this is how I feel. It's like literally, it's just been eating me up. And I just thought that I'll just bring it here. And I don't know what, till today, I don't know where I got that courage to just bring it up, because it was there for the last 12 years. And then what's really interesting is that everyone there spoke about their own struggles with it. And they're like, okay, so it's more about, somewhere down there, vulnerability is also key. It's more like, okay, I'm not the only one, because even when we read stats like, oh, you know what, 70% people at some point have suffered with imposter syndrome, but it's not meaningful to us. It becomes meaningful to us when you realize, oh wow, you know what, somebody that I know personally also is facing the same thing. So now how can we help each other to come out of it?
Wow, that's beautiful. I think that is the most profound thing on imposter syndrome, having the courage to own it, firstly, acknowledge it, and secondly, then give permission to others to actually speak about it. So, if I may ask you for like two steps, two things what we can do to, firstly, identify the imposter syndrome. You've already spoken of perfection and all of those things. But once I've identified it, how can I let go of it? What is the two ways to get rid of imposter syndrome?
So firstly, once we identify it, the word that you used, right, own it, accept that it's actually happening. So many times we run away from the emotions. We run away from what's actually happening. And owning it, and it's just like, okay, yeah, you know what, this is something that I am facing. And it's about, and in two things I would say is almost like something that really helped me is like an affirmation, right? And my affirmation is like, I used to look in front of the mirror, I'm like, I'm as imperfect as I can be. And my only job today is to become slightly less imperfect, and that's it. And that really helped me change my language within. And the other thing is that actually going out and becoming uncomfortable and say asking questions, asking for help, being okay with doing that. It's about taking those uncomfortable decisions and doing it from a perspective of self-kindness. It's more like, we're never going to know all the answers, and that's okay. So
yeah, that's brilliant. So just to round it off, imposter syndrome coming from perfectionism, and I think how I'm going to take it is every time this thing comes up, perfectionism comes up, I'm like, accept it that, you know what, I'm not perfect. I'm an imperfect being, but I'm going to be a little less imperfect today at the end of the day. But perfectionism doesn't exist. And that's a really great way to see it, because not just imposter syndrome, but also perfectionism, I feel, is something which really eats us up. And just acknowledging it and having a conscious riddance of perfectionism from our system will definitely help us be a little bit more easy in our lives.
I love that.
So, on that note, any parting words, Ali?
Self-kindness, gratitude, and self-love. That's pretty much it.
Beautiful. On that positive note, this is all we have for this week. This is What a Guy Wants podcast. My host and co host, Coach Ali, and I am Coach Yogesh, and I'm not perfect. And if you think you're not perfect, please comment below. Give us a like, give us a share. Share with us what you have thought about imposter syndrome. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this podcast on Spotify. I'm not here for the obligatory like, share, and subscribe. The whole purpose behind What a Guy Wants is to make you a better man. If you think this is making you a better version of yourself, please like, share, comment, and see you next week.